Welcome back, and let's now take a look at the gold demand. Prices are off 7% from 2016 highs on the back of strong US dollar. The festive season and weddings have spurred gold buying in India, though. The gold imports have also shot in the month of October to nearly 70 tons from 30 tons in the month of September. So what does that mean for the yellow metal? That's our discussion in this segment. Joining us are two very special guests. Peter McGuire is Chief Executive Officer at XM Australia, and Bernard Dahdah is Precious Metal Analyst at Natixis in London. Gentlemen, hi, thank you so much for joining us. Peter, let me start with you first. And there's plenty happening in the global markets, the US presidential elections and Fed meeting. What is the impact of that you see on commodities and especially in gold?
Well, I think that the jury's out as far as do we see a rate rise in December. I think that at the present time, you'd have to err on the side of probably a larger proportion of pundits are saying that you probably will see a rise in December. What impact that has, of course, if Trump or Hillary elected to power, that's the unknown. So there's no doubt as the crude prices push higher, that'll probably and should lift inflation. You've got the other side of course, you've still got that huge weakness across the Eurozone. You've got, a lot of countries are hemorrhaging. I noticed that Brazil only dropped rates this week, first time in many years, to try and, but they've gone from 14.25 to 14%, so it's nothing significant, but just demonstrates that there's, I think that the weakness in Europe, in the Eurozone will continue. I think that'll push the US dollar up further, and it'd probably have to be a long dollar trade until the end of the year, and that would probably be on the back of that rate rise in December.
Bernard, how do you see the gold prices going ahead? Because the decline in prices have worked well for Indian buyers, but is it going to stay here, or do you see a jump up comeback?
I see prices for 2017 at 1180 and for 2018 at $1,100 an ounce. And I see a slight drop in the price of gold up to December as we talk more and more about the Fed interest rate hike.
Peter, would you say the same? The first 6 months of this year have been excellent, 28% gains. Second half, we've seen gold prices struggling. But would you agree with Bernard? Do you also think the prices can go down further?
Well, we're heading into Diwali, and I wish I was here to be able to experience it in India over the next week. So there's probably going to be great as far as jewellery consumption and retail buyers. If you're looking at gold as a trade, I think that the price swings will continue. US dollar up, gold will probably come down. Again, the unknown is any geopolitical concerns or tensions. What happens in Mosul, I think, has to be taken into consideration. If it's a long, drawn-out effect or there's unknowns happen, and that's what happens in war, there are unknowns, then that could affect that market. You would have to say that probably where the gold over the next, say, 4 to 6 weeks, I think it'll oscillate and range trade probably 1260 to down to say 1220, unless something dramatic happens that makes it, and that's an unknown. That happens in the future, and that can greatly impact a market. Let's just see what happens to equities. Let's see if Trump gets in or Clinton, and that's the wait and see approach, and that's the dynamic nature of the market.
Well, absolutely. Bernard, what's your sense? Because the festivals are in for India, and the next week it's only going to pick up further. Would you think that this would increase demand for physical buying here?
Yeah, I mean, historically it does increase, but I'm not sure, this year, given the monsoon season, how successful, how it hasn't been probably the best monsoon season, and research has shown that there is a clear correlation between both. And I think the import duties into India are still a big, on gold, are still a big issue, hindering increased demand for gold.
Peter, coming back to you, what's your sense on the levels on gold prices going ahead? Where do you see a support and a resistance, and whether it's a good time to invest here?
Well, I think you'd have to say, but you're under 1225, 1220. Probably it'll take 1180 out to the downside. If it marches down there quickly, that could be I'm saying possibly first quarter, 2017. But again, what happens as far as who's elected and what happens to US dollar? If the dollar comes under some pressure, if they don't raise rates in December, and then I think that the dollar possibly will come off a fraction, and that could possibly push gold up. So again, we've got to wait and see what's happening over the next 3 to 6 weeks. I'm very mindful, and I think it's going to be, and you put that 170th meeting to some sort of context in Vienna on the 30th of November. That really is quite a critical point as far as production, but more importantly, what's happening across the Middle East, where does Saudis go, and of course Russia. So I think that you wrap that up into the whole pie of things. If things don't work favourably and OPEC and the non-OPEC can't hit a headline number together and cut production, then that could greatly drive the gold price, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it edge higher from here. So I know that's I'm giving you a lot of different answers, but I think that it's a very fascinating time over the next matter of weeks.
It clearly is, Peter. But Bernard, a final word with you. And what is your view on how should one really be buying into gold? Is it the ETF demand or paper buying or the physical gold that really catches your eye?
Yeah, in terms of ETF demand, physically backed ETF demand, most of the physically backed ETF demand is made by Western investors. So it's usually a reflection of investment sentiment in the West. It's gone up substantially this year by over 500 tons, which put into perspective total demand for gold in 1 year is roughly 4,400 or 4,300 tons. So that's a substantial amount of gold coming from physically backed ETFs. And I think just as the rates start going up, we could potentially see an outflow from physically backed ETFs. I think paper gold has lost some space at the expense of physical backed ETFs, which are more and more popular.
Your point is well taken, Peter and Bernard. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen, and giving us your cues on gold. So yes, it's a good time to buy, especially in the Indian market at the physical point.